So you were actually the only person in the Republican Party to speak out against QAnon before QAnon tried to overthrow the government. And you co-authored Condemning QAnon and Rejecting the Conspiracy Theories it Promotes. How much does the Republican Party's embrace of conspiracy theories and this kind of alternate reality that they're being trapped in, how much of that is kind of the building blocks of the current Republican Party? And, how much of that also kind of pushed you out? Was it the conspiracy theories in general and QAnon?
It's a great question. You sort of got to be facts-based when you're killing terrorists. You're using data and facts-based insights to track bad guys. And I think what I saw with all this disinformation and all this propaganda, it got to a point I couldn't take it as a former military officer, but I couldn't take it as somebody who was, marginally sane. So that's kind of, the kind of thing that I saw. But as far as the party, I don't want to shock you all, but it was our team that found the Meadows texts, right? So I was the first person to read the Mark Meadows text with all the names matched to the numbers. And it was my team that found the Ginny Thomas text. So if you look at the 2,319 texts, the conspiracy theories are so varied and insane that when I read the text, I call them the bourbon text because I had to drink. Because what happens is that the absolute number of conspiracy theories number in the dozens, and it's inundated, it's saturated the GOP from the activist class through to the committee class, which is the state committees, through to the national committee class, which is the RNC, to the NRCC, which is the National Republican Congressional Committee, then all the way up to the executive and legislative and judicial branches. If you remember, with Ginny Thomas saying that her best friend agreed with her best friend being her husband. You're talking about on the legislative side. You're talking about the 36 or so congressional representatives that were actually texting with Mark Meadows with some of the crazy stuff that still hasn't come out yet, like videos from foreign sources. I'm telling you, it's insane. Then you have the Trump family, and people don't know the cabinet for Trump were on the text messages also, which has never really been released. So those are the kind of things. Every single portion of the Republican Party is bought into the deep state globalist satanic type of methodology that everybody against them is part of this globalist cabal that's trying to institute, socialism or communism into the United States.
Denver, does a whip come to you early on, the Republican whip, and say, this is what we're doing, get on board, or you're off the train? Is it that? Do they say it like that?
What a question. Yes, absolutely. There's no doubt. So even to the point, like I had this quote and they said, hey, Denver, if you get out of the current, you can't get back in. Think about that statement. And I said, listen, with my incredible good looks and charisma, right, I'm sure I can anyway. But anyway, I'm sure I get in there. But I think what happened was that, I just got to a point I couldn't sleep at night. My health, mentally and physically, was affected by not being who I was. And, the whip at the time was Steve Scalise. The deputy whip was Drew Ferguson from Georgia. Me and Drew grew very close. But I remember during the QAnon vote on the floor, he said, Denver, you pretty much destroyed your career. You pissed off the big guy being Trump. And I really told at that time, Drew and I were close. And, he retired this year. He actually is fairly sane. And, I told Drew, I said, I don't give a flying rat's ass what Donald Trump thinks. I said, I actually served my country, and I don't care what a bloviating pretend billionaire thinks about me at this point. And the shock, on his face, I said, go F himself. They're all I care, so, but by that point I was done anyway. It sounds brave, but I was just wanting to be in a bar fight at that point. I was so confrontational, but yeah, the whip will come to you and say, this is your vote. And if you say no, all of a sudden you find that your fundraising isn't quite as good the next quarter.
Off committees, all that stuff, right?
Gosh, or you're not getting bills through committee, right? You might not even be off the committee, but all of a sudden, wait a minute, why can't I get this even through the committee process, right? Through my own leadership. And so those are some of the things that you have to be prepared for if you don't stay on the team. And that is the issue with the two-party system, really, is that tribalism runs everything. And if you're off the team, you're off the team.
Yeah, Democrats do that too. I mean,
and you had said, I believe this was in your report on QAnon, when ideas or fantasy are weaponized, there is a metamorphosis from harmless, bizarre theories to a dangerous bloom of tribalism and dehumanization of others. This bloom expands digitally from person to person, absorbing and then converting a tribe that believes alternate realities based on a directed stream of algorithmically and group-targeted data, ignorant analytic white papers, memes, ideas, and coded language.
Wow.
Now, since leaving Congress, you've actually been working on this issue with the Network Contagion Research Institute to study disinformation and how to combat it. Who are the largest purveyors of disinformation right now, and how do we combat it?
You know, a lot of people would say, you know, there's a huge foreign element in disinformation.
Mhm.
But when you look at the largest purveyors of disinformation, and listen, we could have this would be an hour conversation on the TikTok generation, the Israel Hamas issue. I mean, we could go into this. But when
Mhm.
I'm looking at the biggest purveyors of disinformation, this is what gets me in trouble. So I'm going to get in trouble right now.
Mhm.
But it seems to be the Christian white nationalist push
Mhm.
with Reawaken America, the NAR, the UIP, Ziklag,
Mhm.
Seven Mountains Dominionism. There's this massive push. It's not just disinformation, though. It's actually sort of this dehumanizing language that's mixed with this sort of this ethos that every law or every regulatory issue or policy has to come from the Bible. And I
Mhm.
think that's really dangerous. Somebody who was raised Mormon and Southern Baptist, trust me, I get it. And so, but that's, I think the issue is not just the disinformation, it's the hate that's linked to sort of these slant angle attacks that's wrapped in myth. So you have this myth disinformation cluster bomb that's being dropped on people, and it's metastatic. So, you know, and when you have a metastasized virus of myth and disinformation that combines, and it's coming from one major party.
Mhm.
And it's funny, you were just saying, yeah, the Democrats do it too. And I say crazy is not party specific. We know this,
Mhm.
but the far right is in a hold my beer moment. And I think that's the issue that we have. And that far right hold my beer really is that Christian nationalist sort of, you know, everybody but us
Mhm.
sucks,
Yeah.
to be blunt. And I think that's really our biggest threat right now.
I think, and too, did it give you any hope that Michael McCall and Mike Rogers, who run committees on the Republican side, publicly said that there's Russian disinformation being spread by Republicans on the House floor as well as right-wing television? I felt like that was a step up for guys who could both be pretty political. I'm sure they're great, but to call that out, you know, was an important step. I think that just happened this weekend.
It
Well,
did.
yeah. How do you feel?
So,
What's
so
your
Mike,
take on the generals sending these letters to the Supreme Court saying
Mhm.
that if you give this guy immunity, then we're moot?
Mhm.
I mean, that's, to me, when I heard that, I thought these guys are Milley was really worried on January 6th when he called China. It looked like everything was about to fall apart, and he wanted to make sure they understood that. I can only be. I mean, were you ever on the Intelligence Committee?
no, but I was actually, well, so I was going to be on the HIPSI if I won the second term. Actually, I was as a freshman, I was the committee chair for national security on financial services for Treasury.
Okay.
There's 17 intelligence agencies, but my background is special access programs, SAPs, and special technical operations for the Air Force and for special operations. So I have some,
So,
you know, I got a little,
yeah.
I got some juice. Yeah. And, you know, and to Tom's question too, I know Mike McCall really well. He actually wants to come drink at my distillery. Like we
Mhm.
definitely shared a few bourbons together. One of my closer friends, because Mike is actually sane. However, you got to tilt one way or the other if you're going to stay, you know,
Mhm.
for winning. But for Mike to come out and say that, and for Rogers, you know, and I didn't hear Rogers' statement, but I heard McCall's.
Mhm.
I was actually very proud of him. The issue that
Mhm.
he's going to have is blowback and probably or possibly a primary opponent, you know, as he comes up to the next election. So that's the issue that you have, is that when you're brave, you can get face shot. And I know that for a fact. And I think that's the issue. And as far as Milley, you know, incredible points, right? Our military leadership at the time saw the danger of Donald Trump, and the fact that there's intimidation going on at those levels. I think the military speaking out about the separation of powers is really important. But I think you're seeing the Millies and the Mattises and the Kellys come out and say, you know, Trump's insane. I think it's very important for the American public to hear.